In 1971, the Indian subcontinent bore witness to one of its most defining and transformative conflicts, a struggle whose legacy continues to shape the politics, identities, and memories of India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan to this day. To truly understand the significance and complexity of this chapter in history, it is essential to explore not just what transpired on the ground, but how different nations remember and interpret those historic months. Here, we will follow a detailed timeline of key events in the 1971 war, and then journey through the contrasting narratives embedded in the history textbooks and collective memory of India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. As the decade of the 1970s dawned, Pakistan was comprised of two discontinuous wings, West Pakistan and East Pakistan, separated by more than 1,000 miles of Indian territory. Despite the numerical majority and vibrant culture of the Bengalis in East Pakistan, political and military power was concentrated in the hands of the Western elite. Tensions simmered for years over issues of language, economic disparity, and political representation. The situation came to a head when, in December 1970, the Awami League, led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, achieved a decisive victory in Pakistan's first general election, winning almost all the seats in East Pakistan and a clear majority nationwide. Instead of peacefully handing over power, West Pakistani leaders stalled, fearing loss of dominance. By March 1971, frustrations boiled over. In the early hours of March 25th, the Pakistan Army launched Operation Searchlight, a brutal military crackdown on East Pakistan's civilian population, intellectuals, and unarmed political activists. The violence was indiscriminate and devastating, with reports of massacres in Dhaka and across the region. An exodus of terrified civilians, fleeing the violence and searching for safety, surged into neighboring India. Over the coming months, estimates of the number of refugees who crossed the border reached as high as 10 million. In the wake of these atrocities, Bengali political leaders, including Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, made covert and overt calls for independence. On March 26th, what would later be recognized as Bangladesh's Independence Day, Major Ziaur Rahman, one of the early officers to defect, broadcast a declaration of independence on behalf of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman from the coastal city of Chittagong. In the shadows and forests, small bands of freedom fighters, known as the Mukti Bahini, began organizing resistance, waging guerrilla campaigns against the Pakistani military and its local collaborators. India watched these developments with growing alarm. The refugee influx threatened its border states, straining food supplies, health services, and infrastructure. Meanwhile, Indian leaders, foremost among them Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, were moved both by the humanitarian catastrophe and the strategic opportunity. By summer's end in 1971, India had begun openly training and arming the Mukti Bahini, offering their camp safe haven along the stretched border. For 9 months, the Mukti Bahini fought with determination, carrying out sabotage, hit-and-run raids, and intelligence gathering. Despite immense bravery, the lightly armed guerrillas faced overwhelming odds against a better-equipped Pakistani army. Internationally, the crisis remained largely ignored or misunderstood, with Cold War superpowers and the United Nations hesitant to intervene directly. By late November, the stage was set for broader conflict. On December 3, 1971, Pakistan preemptively attacked Indian airfields in the west, seeking to divert attention and force India to fight on two fronts. India responded by formally entering the war, launching a coordinated assault into both West and East Pakistan. In eastern theaters, Indian regular troops, advancing in close coordination with Mukti Bahini guerrillas, rapidly overwhelmed Pakistani positions. The campaign was swift, lasting less than 2 weeks, thanks to the poor supply lines and morale of the besieged Pakistani forces and the determined local resistance. On December 16, 1971, Lieutenant General A.A.K. Niazi, commander of Pakistani troops in the east, signed the instrument of surrender to Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora of India at Dhaka's racecourse, before crowds of jubilant Bangladeshis. The world's newest nation, Bangladesh, emerged almost overnight. But amidst this triumph, historical wounds and questions lingered. Some Bangladeshis were aggrieved that their own military leader, General Osmani, was not present at the surrender table, a symbolism that sparked years of debate over whether India's role was one of essential partnership or heavy-handed dominance. In the weeks that followed, as Bengalis began the arduous task of rebuilding, the stories of those who fought, suffered, and survived would take root, woven tightly into the narrative of national identity. How, then, do the three nations remember and teach this shared yet deeply contested past? A look into their textbooks, public commemorations, and political rhetoric reveals much about the ongoing battle over memory and meaning. In India's narrative, the 1971 war stands as a moment of national pride, a shining example of humanitarian intervention, successful military strategy, and moral resolve. Indian textbooks and public commemorations highlight the country's sheltering of refugees, support for the Mukti Bahini, and the swift, decisive campaign led by its armed forces. Indira Gandhi is celebrated for her diplomatic acumen and willingness to stand up to international pressure, particularly from the United States and China, who had tilted toward supporting Pakistan. The war is remembered as a declaration of India's emergence as a regional power and as a compassionate neighbor willing to act against injustice. While Indian accounts acknowledge the bravery of Bangladeshi fighters, the emphasis often rests on Indian military competence and strategic foresight. For Bangladesh, the war, known popularly as the Liberation War, is the foundational myth of the nation. Textbooks and public stories delve into the roots of Bengali nationalism, chronicling years of marginalization, the central importance of language and culture, the political moment of the Awami League's electoral victory, and the harrowing genocide that spurred the call to arms. The Mukti Bahini are lionized, and the sacrifices of millions, both those who fought and those who perished, are revered. In Bangladeshi retellings, independence arose primarily through the indomitable spirit and unity of its people, with India's role recast as supportive, but ultimately secondary. The trauma of the war, especially the stories of mass killings and the persecution of women and minorities, are central to the national memory. Bangladeshis honor their own martyrs and leaders, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman as the father of the nation, and figures like Ziaur Rahman and General Osmani as national heroes. Across the border in Pakistan, the story of 1971 is one of loss, betrayal, and suppressed grief. For decades, the events of that year were shrouded in silence, if not outright denial. Early textbooks often glossed over the causes of the war, attributing it to Indian interference rather than acknowledging the political repression and violence unleashed in East Pakistan. Where the fall of Dhaka is mentioned, it is depicted as the tragic result of foreign conspiracy, military miscalculation, or even treacherous acts by local collaborators. Some narratives highlight the courage of Pakistani soldiers and bemoan the lack of international support, while rarely examining the causes that drove the Bengali majority to seek independence. Over time, some Pakistani scholars and reformers have called for a more honest reckoning, recognizing how internal injustices contributed to the breakup. But such voices remain contested in the mainstream. The international community's narrative is yet another strand in this tapestry. Many Cold War powers were guided by geopolitics rather than humanitarian impulses. The United States, allied with Pakistan and intent on opening relations with China, was slow to criticize the crackdown in East Pakistan. The Soviet Union, by contrast, supported India, signing a treaty of peace, friendship, and cooperation just months before the war, a move that helped deter wider intervention. Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council was paralyzed by superpower rivalry, unable to intervene quickly or effectively. What emerges from this panorama is not a single, unified account, but a mosaic of memories, motivations, and interpretations. For India, 1971 is the hour of decisive action, of stepping up as a regional power, of standing for humanitarian values and reshaping the strategic balance of South Asia. For Bangladesh, it is the story of rebirth, independence, and extraordinary sacrifice, a people's dream finally realized against terrible odds. Pakistan's narrative, meanwhile, is still wrestling with the ghosts of partition, loss, and lessons unlearned. Yet beneath the differing interpretations, some truths are universally acknowledged. The creation of Bangladesh ended one of the worst humanitarian crises of the century. The war changed the geopolitical landscape forever, reducing Pakistan's size by half and giving India a buffer to its east. It stands as a testament to the high price of denying self-determination and the perils of majoritarian rule and military repression. The 1971 war, whether celebrated, mourned, or contested, serves as a powerful reminder that history is never one story alone, but rather the convergence of many. India and Bangladesh's partnership in those months altered the destinies of millions, but the right to narrate and claim ownership of that victory remains fiercely guarded on both sides. Even now, the events of 1971 shape national dialogue, foreign policy, and the personal memories of those who lived through them. In understanding the different narratives found in India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, we come to appreciate not only the complexity of history, but also the deep emotional investments that shape how nations remember, commemorate, and pass down their stories to future generations. Only by honoring each strand, as both inextricably linked and distinctly its own, can we begin to grasp the true meaning and enduring resonance of 971.